Great. Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, everybody. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As Lori said, my name is Maranda Williams. I am the Indiana State Organizer for Reform Alliance. At Reform, we are a national organization, and we are actually the only national organization that aims to specifically transform the probation and parole system. Our goal is to change laws and systems and the culture of what it means to be involved in the system, and really change the narrative about individuals who maybe have a criminal record, have been involved in the prison system, have been impacted, and really let people understand that how easy it is to get in the system, but also how hard it is to get out of the system. So we do this by building coalitions, changing the narrative through storytelling aspects in the community, engaging private sectors and people who may not be exposed to this population. Their vision and understanding of the prison system may be what they see on TV or in a TikTok video or something like that, but exposing them to what it means to be an impacted individual, and also supporting the grassroots efforts, people like you all who are providing services and support to those inside incarceration and as they transition out. Just a quick background about myself. I joined Reform Alliance in January of 2023. Although we're a national organization that was established in 2019, Reform did not come to Indiana till late November, December, and 2022. So prior to my time with Reform, I actually worked for the Indiana Department of Correction for a little over 16 years. I worked inside the facility at a men's level 1. I worked with juvenile girls. I was promoted to administration, helping write policies and procedures on case management, best practices, things like that. And then I left as the director of transitional healthcare, which really focused on addressing social determinants of health as individuals were releasing, really focusing on not using a justice response to issues that could be addressed in the community. Like access to health care, ensuring that individuals who had severe mental health issues, severe physical health issues, had the proper referrals and resources available as they transitioned out. So we are talking about Reform, which I'm super excited to have this space to talk about. We are working on changing systems. So probation and parole is kind of a lost topic when we talk about criminal justice reform. There's sometimes this myth or this understanding that individuals should just be thankful that they're out of a prison system or they're out of jail once they're released. And if you have never been exposed to this side of supervision, sometimes it's just as incarcerating to be on supervision. There's a lot of rules and responsibilities, stipulations that can really prevent people from being successful. And many times we ourselves, the community, legislatively, we've created these barriers where we expect people to transition out of incarceration and be successful, but we are not creating pathways for that to happen. And that is what Reform is all about, creating those pathways to opportunity and well-being. Since 2019, we've been able to pass 17 bills in 11 states, which we're really proud of, which is allowing us to create pathways out of the system for almost 700,000 people. So these are individuals who have successfully participated in their supervision, and our legislation is letting them transition out of supervision, returning back to their community, to their families, to their jobs as productive members. So if you're not familiar with what the justice system looks like, the numbers are a little scary. So when we're talking about people on supervision who return back to prison systems, we're looking at over 50% of the prison population are people who are incarcerated for not committing new crimes. So these are rule violations that if you and I were to do in the community, we would not lose our freedom. This could be as simple as and moving without permission of our probation officer. This could be being late to appointments. It could be as simple as losing your job and not being able to find another one. So very technical things that would not necessarily be considered public safety issues, but we are punishing people for that and returning them back to incarceration. If we're talking about numbers here in Indiana, we have over 100,000 people on supervision right now. And that's not including individuals who are on pre-trial detention. That's just people who've been in the system who are on community supervision, which is 7% of the state's population. So that's a pretty large number for Indiana, and some of our policies and legislation doesn't quite follow best practices. And we also want to acknowledge that as we talk about people being caught in the system, there's different things that are affected, but individuals who have that criminal record, have that impact from the justice system, we could be looking at their annual income being under $20,000 a year or less. So definitely not setting individuals up for success as we're transitioning them out, but in the same way, expecting accountability and success for them. One of the legislation that reform is pushing right now, which ironically isn't about supervision, when we came to Indiana in the late winter months, House Bill 1648 was the bill that reform wanted to champion, and it's under a sentence modification bill, but the gist of the bill is really about compassionate release. So we are pushing legislation for individuals who are elderly or who have become terminally ill, medically incapacitated, maybe total care patients who are currently serving their time in the Department of Correction. We are championing legislation to allow them an opportunity to be modified through the court for release. So the current legislation, an individual can only request modifications a certain amount of time, but our bill will allow them to request a sentence modification if they meet this criteria. And just from fiscal numbers, I mean, we know that the cost of keeping somebody incarcerated is already expensive, but when we're adding on the medical care of, somebody who is total care or terminal, just adds to it. We're currently spending $160 million on a medical contract right now, caring for people in the Department of Correction. And we're looking at about 3,000 individuals who could be considered individuals who are not a public safety issue, but their lives are dwindling, and they're dying in prison for no other reason other than they don't have an opportunity for release. So regardless of the fiscal impact, we're really talking about compassion. If that was a family member, if that was your mother, father, brother, sister, why wouldn't we want to give them an opportunity to find a pathway to release, to die with dignity and respect in their community with the support of their family, rather than being inside a prison wall in a cold prison bed with strangers around them. So our bill really focuses on transitioning them out, giving them an opportunity to get that care in the community that's already provided through federal Medicaid dollars, and giving them an opportunity to spend their last days as dignified humans. Especially, when we talk about the punitive model of corrections, if an individual wasn't sentenced to die in prison, why would we leave them to die in prison? If we have an opportunity to do the right thing and show them that compassion, we're not teaching them any lesson if we allow them to live their final days in a prison cell. That's not going to change the trajectory of anything. So why would we not want to push to do the right thing? So we have an opportunity tomorrow, actually, to present in front of the Correction and Courts Interim Study Committee, chaired by Senator Freeman, and we will be providing testimony of why we want to continue our compassionate release bill, addressing some of the concerns that they had with the legislation. And we're bringing in some of our national conservative partners to really show support that this reforming the system doesn't have to be a radical change. It's we're a bipartisan organization, and we have a lot of conservative coalition partners that support this bill, and they want to see these people have an opportunity to go home. So we're really excited about tomorrow. So please, send us prayers that it goes well, and we'll be able to change some of the hearts and minds of the legislators who are concerned about it. But hopefully we'll get some strong leeway after we get to testify and really talk through some of their concerns. And as we talk about like what that looks like, reform has a very specific policy framework that helps us guide what we do. So when we look at from incarceration to the community, our goal is to really support reimaging of like supervision, changing that narrative and getting feedback from the community and looking at how can we transition people safely back to the community. So we're talking about individuals who are not public safety concerns, people who are, they want to do the right thing. They want to provide to their family. They want to contribute to something greater, and they want to give that opportunity. So we really want to focus on changing that image of those who have been impacted through legislative opportunities and following best practices. So we tend to have a very blanket justice system, and we want it to a one size fit all. And as humans, it just doesn't work like that. And it's not best practice to have a one size fits all. So really looking at what the best practices say, what does the research say about what's being successful, what is a true public safety issue, and how can we create policies and legislation around that. And from there, once we do that, what opportunities are we providing for those impacted individuals? So it's great if we do all of this, but are we still creating those pathways to well-being? So even though reform does not provide any direct services, like case management or legal services, we support the organizations and people who do their direct services. So we pushed a national grant opportunity to nonprofits that is doing some of the work, and we also champion the Indiana Secure Communities Coalition that I'm going to talk about. And that's really how we're doing the work here in Indiana. So even though we're a national organization, the work that is happening in Indiana is all homegrown by the support of our coalition members. Luckily, I've been very blessed and privileged because a lot of our coalition members were very supportive of the work that I did in DOC. So I already had some of those connections, but being in this role, I've really been able to enhance and expand the reach of building this coalition to a true bipartisan solution-based community members. So we currently have about 123 coalition members covered statewide, involving reentry organizations, those who do the direct services, the referrals, the job training, job placements. We have educators from multiple universities across the state, criminal justice professors, law professors, people who are involved in the system on that end. We have business leaders who support fair chance hiring and want to provide opportunity for our impacted individuals. We have faith leaders that support the impacted individuals while they're inside and also as they transition out, providing that fellowship and mentorship, as they transition and find their way through the community. We even have some support from some retired law enforcement members who understand, again, that the justice system can't be a one size fits all. So the change that we're looking at, public safety has to be at the forefront of that, but we can still reform a system. And none of that could be possible with impacted individuals guiding us and telling us what that looks like, sharing their experiences, sharing, the good, bad, and the horror stories that, you may hear about through third or fourth parties, and you think that things like that could never happen. But there are some things that the system has done to people that is not just, and we need to put safeguards in place so that doesn't happen. So again, we have statewide representation from all of those parties. We as me, I'm the champion of the coalition. I host biweekly Zoom meetings, bringing all of these parties together to really just talk about what's going on in our community. So providing community leaders to speak about the work that they're doing, if they have specific call to actions that need to be done, if businesses are hiring, if communities need support in a specific area. It's a really great place to get a one-stop audience and access a network that maybe you typically wouldn't have access to. And if you're not able to attend the Zoom meetings, I do a biweekly email update just to recap everything that's going on. Again, community events, legislative updates. I will be doing one after our meeting with the committee tomorrow, just keeping everybody abreast of what's going on, maybe where the gaps that need to be filled across the state are, or, people are doing very parallel work out in this field. So how can we join together, join forces, and become a stronger community with public safety in the forefront, but also helping, have accountability for those who, are not following the law and are the true public safety issues. Let's separate those from those who want to do well, help them transition out in the community and provide that opportunity. We're really excited about, this legislative session. Along with our compassionate release testimony, we will also be asking the committee if they will be willing to discuss any other opportunities for supervision reform. We have provided a policy menu, but we definitely want the community and the committee to kind of guide us on what they want that to look like. So hopefully we'll have a great update by the end of the day tomorrow, and we'll know what the future looks like for the supervision space here in Indiana and the work that Reform and the Coalition will be doing. I noticed that there's a bunch of different faith organizations on here, and you all are more than welcome to join the coalition as your own entity, as your own person, on behalf of your church. It's really a safe space. There's no monetary requirement to join. If you don't come to the meetings, you don't get kicked out of the coalition. It's really, you make it what you want it, and I'm here to accommodate. I also always offer my services since I was in the Department of Correction for so long and very familiar with the system. Anytime I could help guide that conversation, make connections, bring people together, I'm always willing to do that. Public safety is also at the forefront of the work that I do, and this is my life, and I want to be there to help in any capacity that I can. So and there's no strings attached to that offer. So thank you guys for an opportunity, for letting me speak, and let me know if you have any questions.
I have a question. When you are meeting with Senator Freeman tomorrow, is that the Senate Corrections Committee?
Yes.
And what is the bill that you are proposing?
Oh, it's
the number.
House Bill 1648. People call it compassionate release, but it's actually a sentence modification bill. Okay. And I can send it to Lori, and Lori, if you want to share it with people, I can send you the draft if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be good to include that. And what can we write our Senator Freeman and let him know that we are in support of this, or what can we do to help encourage it?
Sure. Well, we had a separate meeting with Senator Freeman a few weeks ago, and when the bill was first introduced, he was really concerned that there wasn't enough safeguards for the bill There was a individual in Senator Glick's region who was released from Michigan DOC on a compassionate release from their understanding. And from my understanding, this individual burned down a building in her district. So there was a lot of misconceptions about what compassionate release looked like. So, and ironically, that was all the work that I did in DOC. I did medical planning for severe individuals. So I was able to have a conversation with him on, the practices and policies that are already in place by DOC, and what it means to be terminally ill and in hospice care and total care, and the assessments that are required to even meet that level of care. So once we had that conversation, he was a little more open-minded about it. And we're going to talk about that with the committee tomorrow as well. So the letters of support are always helpful, but I'm hoping we won't need them after tomorrow once people really understand the purpose of the bill and the population that we are trying to transition out.
Thank you.
Miranda,
Yes, Susie.
we've always had a compassionate release practice. I assume there was a bill at some point. Would you explain why that isn't working and why this new one is advantageous?
Yes, well, and that's a great point. So there's a couple of different things. So right now, the process for an individual to qualify for compassionate release, I mean, you could do medical clemency or you could be released through the Indiana Parole Board. But the caveat to that is nobody is in a hurry to transition these individuals out. When I was in DOC doing this, I mean, we had people who passed away when the paperwork was sitting on somebody's desk. There was no, and currently DOC doesn't have a responsibility to notify the family member that their loved one is ill. They don't have to really even communicate the care plan with the individual. They don't have to notify the court. There's no time frames to put in place to really make anybody do anything. And our bill puts those practices in place. It gives DOC obligation to track, monitor, and contact the court when somebody's diagnosis change. It gives the courts a timeline to make a decision. It requires DOC to create that care plan so we're successfully transitioning and safely transitioning that person out into the community. So there's these accountability pieces that are not currently there.
Thank you.
May I add?
Who's being held accountable?
It would right now, it would be DOC in the courts.
So it would be basically the warden and not a politician?
It would be DOC as an agency. So it would, like, obviously the chief medical officer, whoever's supervising the chief medical officer, chief of staff, the commissioner. Because really, it's not when the diagnosis and things like that happen, it's really the medical provider's responsibility to be communicating with DOC what needs to happen. So there's the warden wouldn't really have any part in that unless, they're actively preventing that person from getting care or something.
Miranda?
But it would be DOC as an agency.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My question: how is this funded? Who's paying for this program? The care and all that. How is that funded?
So when they're transitioned out to the community,
Yes.
it would be the Medicaid dollars, the federal dollars that the state already gets.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. You mean
Miranda,
May I add that my mentee from 2005, Linda Chessie, who was twice recommended for clemency by the clemency board, died in prison with lung cancer after 33 years of serving for a crime she did not commit. But neither Governor Pence nor Governor Holcomb would give her clemency. And I would like to add that, to my knowledge, there's only been one woman ever given clemency. All the clemency has gone to males.
That's interesting.
Thank you.
And really, when situations like that happen, DOC really puts the responsibility on the individual to file that modification with the court. But again, if you're total care fighting, a terminal illness, do you want to put that energy into doing all that work? Without the support of anyone else. So again, that's what I personally am excited to see about this legislation. There's advocacy for the individual and accountability for the community to do something about this.
I've got one.
Miss Williams,
Go ahead.
I don't know if everyone knows that inside IWP anyway, an individual that wants an appointment with a doctor has to pay $5, and they don't make enough, especially if they've been ill, to get an appointment with a doctor or a dentist inside.
Yeah, if they're not chronic care, then they have to pay for those things. They're chronic care, they pay like your copay, and then they visit the doctor as they are required. But yeah, they still have to pay for their care as anyone else. So yeah, there's a lot of things that
I've got one more question. I was the former administrator for the Methodist jail ministry, and also I'm running for office here in Lawrence, and as which I'm assuming, if God is willing, that I'll be a counselor after November. But as a councilman out here, how do I fit? What could I do as far as this program?
Well, there's a few things that you could do. Joining the coalition is always a great space to start, because again, you're constantly updated about what reform is doing as an organization here in Indiana, but also you're supporting the coalition members that are providing the direct services that are also supporting the work that we're doing.
Okay.
Again, it's free, there's very minimal obligation. The other thing that you could be doing is telling people about reform. So when they first came to Indiana, there was this myth that, that reform was a radical, liberal organization coming into Indiana, trying to change the laws and, take over, this conservative space. And it's so far from the truth. We're a bipartisan organization. Our two top coalition partners are CPAC and Faith and Freedom Coalition. So we have, we have that conservative backing for our support. And reform, again, doesn't have to be radical. We're not here to talk about letting everybody out of prison, defunding the police, and creating the system of complete anarchy. It's Reform Alliance is here to help transition people out of the system with best practices legislation and building a community of safety that we all want to live in.
Okay.
So I think that would be the best, spreading the word about reform, providing me a space to give presentations like this, whether it's at your church, other meetings that you're in, other committees that you're involved in. Again, utilizing the coalition to leverage support for the work that you guys are doing, and, having me be involved in some of the events. I could always come help, volunteer, just be in a space where we can have that conversation that people are comfortable with, and, having a transparent discussion about, the fears and about changing the system, but also why it needs to happen.
Okay.
Russ, did you have a question?
Miranda, it seems that you focus more on the DOC. Is this bill that you're presenting or going tomorrow, is that more for the DOC rather than the local jails?
Yeah, it's only for incarcerated individuals in the prison system. Yes.
So when I get back to my question about letting families know, I personally know from a jail commander side, HIPAA allows me not to tell family members anything. That law abides right there. I don't have to communicate with family.
Mhm.
And when they're in my jail, I basically am in the end to be all. Is there a way that you can incorporate that bill that HIPAA does not dictate to a jail commander and hold that jail commander accountable, or a warden accountable to share information that needs to be shared with that individual?
Yeah, well, I think it was less about like the HIPAA violation. It was more that's in there just because it wasn't a priority for DOC. So, I mean, I think that is the concept of, contacting the family. Not saying that we wouldn't need, those HIPAA practices in place, but it puts the accountability on DOC to at least try. So whether, the individual needs to verbalize that consent or sign a release of information or something to that capacity. But in past practices, a person could have a terminal illness and be incapable of contacting their family, and nobody from DOC would take that responsibility on, whether the individual wanted them to or not.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's why I was pushing for the accountability part.
Yeah.
I just know from 16 and a half years of experience, once they become part of our facility, they become our property basically, and that's the mindset. And they don't have to share and give any information that they don't need to give. And even like when I was on the street, contacting a priest, for an example, to do last rites, that's even changed in the last 10 years because there's a part of the last rites that an individual who's comatose cannot do, which is the confessional part. So, I mean, there has been change, but I think until we get total transformation and total accountability on every level, whether that be the warden, the sheriff, jail commander, whoever, that when someone is incarcerated, they need to be able to get out and to let family know what's going on. Even if it's just simple, a letter sent out to them.
Right.
The other question that I have is with regards to employment. I know for 10 years that we focused on one employer in the county that I served. And that employer, once they realized that the individual was coming from the local jail, they basically gave them minimum wage, where someone who was on the street that applied for the same job would get the standard pay for it. Is there a way that you can, or a way that a bill can be presented that makes an employer not just for pay, but to hold an employer accountable so that when someone does come in to apply, that they will be given all the rights and privileges, or subject to consequences of not fulfilling that obligation? And I realize that that's a lot to take in down the road from HR to the employer stance, but.
No, and I appreciate that question. So we haven't dove as deep into the legislation about that, but what I did do was connect with the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, and I gave a presentation to their policy committee about exactly what you're saying. So again, when people think about an individual releasing from incarceration, going to a job, they want to give them the most basic general labor, jobs that nobody else wants, and pay them less. So we presented a fair chance hiring opportunity to really encourage employers to look at skill-based work and the talent pool inside the incarcerated population, and really start changing their idea of what it means to hire somebody with a record. So we've been trying again to push that narrative. And we held an event at the Indiana Women's Prison with the Last Mile program, which is a coding program that was built and based out of San Quentin, but they teach coding, web design, all the computer tech things that I don't understand. And we brought in employers and gave them that exposure to this is what people are doing inside prison. So when you think about that fair chance hiring, think about the skill set that's offered to them. So we haven't got quite to the legislation of the pay, but really hopefully starting to change that narrative of why they need to rethink how they treat this population. And, when they're released from prison, they are a community member. So, let's stop actively discriminating against them because of, and judging them on the worst decision that they've made, and really look at them as people that could really contribute back to their company. So hopefully we'll get a little bit further with that conversation. But I wrote that down about legislation because we didn't talk specifically about the pay, but thank you for that idea.
And Russ, Indiana Cure looked a couple of years ago at the whole ban the box movement, which means, which is equally important because we know that most of them get turned down, period. The application goes in the file 13. And we do have ban the box in, is it state or is it only Marion County employment? But obviously
it is in Marion County.
Yeah, it's not throughout the entire state by any means. And it has gained momentum as far as other states. It has gained momentum in cities, specific cities. And Second Chance, formerly Unite Indy, has had Butler do a study, and they have found that the employers say that they have had equal success with hiring on the job work from hiring employees who have had a criminal record as to those with a non-criminal record. And Second Chance, they've renamed themselves as Second Chance Indiana, and they hope to build to even add even more employers to their partnership that they can send people to. But I'd love to see Reform Alliance and all of the folks involved in jails and prison ministry hop on that and try to get a statewide bill passed. It doesn't mean that the employer doesn't know that there is a criminal record. It means that they do not find it until after or when a job offer is ready to be made, so that they give the individual a chance to explain rehabilitation and skills and so on. And it's incredible how much recidivism occurs because they can't find jobs. And the other part of that is that Unite Indy or Second Chance Indiana uses a program called Jobs for Life in training the individuals that they work with. And that is another thing that we could look into and advocate for throughout the state, because Second Chance Indy does the Marion County and all the contiguous counties, but doesn't reach Monroe County, or certainly not St. Joseph County, or the ones in the southern part of the state. Those two things I think are incredibly important in could be part of Reform Alliance.
Thank you for sharing that, Susie. Is there any other, thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question to Miranda? Our time is getting close.
I just have a question that when someone is incarcerated, I'm totally unfamiliar. Is there a way that like when you go to a doctor's office, you sign a HIPAA release, you know, who you can contact, anything like that? Is that anything possible when someone's incarcerated, who they would contact for medical?
Yeah, they have an emergency contact, and you know, there should be an ROI scan into their medical file. But again, is the practice happening? I think is the caveat to all of that.
Well, obviously it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well,
Miranda, do you know if there is a new chief medical officer? Or is it still the temporary one?
No, sorry, Lori, I know we only have 3 minutes. The new chief medical officer is Dr. Adrienne Bedford, and she was actually the facility doctor at the Indiana Women's Prison. So she took over Dr. Doss's role when she left. So
Say that name again, Adrienne,
Bedford, and yeah, and Susie, I can send you her email.
please.
Mhm.
well, thank you everyone for this wonderful conversation and just the work that you're doing, Miranda. It is amazing work, and we're just so grateful for Reform Alliance that they came to Indiana and is working it. And just if any of you can, go ahead and join her coalition, you will see the work that they do, and it's really impressive. So thank you so much for coming today to be our presenter, and we just really appreciate you, and hope others will reach out to you to learn more about your work.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate everybody's support. And again, if there's anything I could do to help you with your space, please utilize me.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. Goodbye, everybody. Have a blessed
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.